Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Live Your Edge podcast. This is Gilbert Joy, your host. Today, I'm joined with Vanessa Shaw, who is the CEO and founder of the Business Growth Academy, where she helps business owners scale their business. Welcome to the Live Your Edge podcast. This is Gilbert Joy, your host. The Live Your Edge podcast is where I interview 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful business owners who, in their own right, were able to create a life on their own terms. We talk a lot about stepping out of your comfort zone, but what does it really mean to be in discomfort, and how you can expand your so-called comfort zone by being able to constantly test and challenge yourself. Today we'll be speaking with Dan Gringas, who is an international keynote speaker that believes that a remarkable customer experience can be your best marketing. Dan just doesn't talk about customer experience. His fast-paced, energetic presentation style creates an experience for the audience that they'll surely remember. Today we're going to be speaking about customer experience, customer service, so much more. And Dan, he's been named the top 50 customer service experts of the decade. He's been named the top 50 thought leaders to follow on Twitter in 2020, as well as the top 100 digital marketers in 2019. I'm really excited for this episode, so join me in welcoming Dan Gringas. Welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So tell us about your experience with scaling, helping business owners scale their businesses. What are some of the crucial steps to scaling? At what point do you determine that someone is ready for scaling?
Gosh, those are also great questions, right? And lots of things in there that I like. Let's unpick them and make this super practical for anybody listening in as well. So I think, first and foremost, a lot of people try to scale something before they have nailed something, right? Really important distinctions that everybody gets obsessed with, growth and scale and, a marketing, in fact, marketing mentor that I worked with at some point, she used to always say, we've got to nail it first before we scale it. And what does that even mean? Really, what does that mean? And it means things on multiple different levels. But, if we're trying to scale a business model that frankly is faulty in the beginning, right, all we're going to do is scale something that's got more and more problems. And that can sound like, wouldn't people be able to work that out beforehand? How do we know if we've got a faulty business model? But you'd be surprised at how many people actually have a broken business model that they're trying to scale. But again, what does that mean? What does that look like in practice, right? So somebody that's already working way too many hours, right? Perhaps they're working with a ton of clients that they don't even particularly appreciate. They're not doing their best work. They're not being, they're barely paying themselves. And they think, especially because I deal with a lot of service-based businesses, they think that if they can, kind of get it past a certain level, that a lot of those problems will actually work themselves out. And what they need to be able to do is actually work out the business model at an earlier stage. And is it something that they want to be doing, right? That they can pay themselves, that they can hire, help, that there's enough demand for, and also work out their process, if you like, their signature system of working with people to scale it. So that's the kind, make sure you nail it before you scale it. So you've got to understand who your ideal customer or client is. What are the core problems that you're solving for them? What's your unique process for how you actually, help them get to those outcomes and results? And of course, what's the monetization of it, right? Will it be profitable? Because businesses are supposed to be profitable. It's not a bad word. In fact, it's a really good word in the small business community, because otherwise business owners are working way too hard, right? And they are not paying themselves barely anything, and certainly not the kind of money they should be for the hours they're putting in.
So tell us about business models for the kind of clients that you work with, what kind of business models are you referring to, and how have they how have they evolved with cases where, people are working from home now and then they're less reliant on having physical staff, and how has that changed?
Oh, lots of changes. And the truth is we work with lots of different businesses. So it's not like we've got one kind of cookie cutter business model that we're imposing on other people, because that exists as well, where we're trying to fit everybody into like a template. We work with attorneys, doctors, naturopaths, marketing people, consultants, high-end coaches. I mean, a lot of different services. So again, the business models there become very unique and custom. But as I say, at the core, one of the things, several things that we do is at the core of that business model is we actually start with the business owner, right? We don't look at the business. It's like, what does the owner want? What are the goals that they set? What is the vision that they want, not only for their business and their life, right? So again, it's like starting on the personal side to make sure that what we're going to create for them in the business is aligned with them personally. And I think that's just so important, because then the business is almost an extension of you and life gets somewhat easier. So, for example, it can be, a lot of people don't realize that they've got a unique process. They've got some very unique stages that they take every single client through, because oftentimes, as you'll know this for yourself, and certainly with all the interviews and podcasts that you do, sometimes we're just so close, right, to what we do, that we don't see the uniqueness, right? Or those steps, or, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, there's something that we do time and time again with our clients, and it's core. So oftentimes that is part of the process that we're taking people through, is so that they can understand that sequence that they've got that's very unique to them. And again, once we understand that piece, that's becomes scalable. Now, again, I want to be super practical. What do I mean by that? Does it means that we can teach somebody else to do it, right? A lot of I'm working with founders where they're the ones, like myself, I'm the one with all the knowledge in my head, right? How do we scale Vanessa so that she can serve, hundreds of people, not just, perhaps 20 people. So we've got to get that knowledge out first, and kind of that IP. And then from there, we can teach that to somebody else. Either we can create a system for ourselves, like a video system whereby we kind of share that knowledge in workbooks, or equally so we can train other team members, right, in our methodology. So those things start to become more, scalable. So we're either scaling through systems or through team. And most times, in all honesty, it's a combination of the two, certainly with the businesses that we work with. So to your point of, what are some of the changes that have actually happened with COVID? Well, a lot of the businesses that we work with have been more traditional. They've not been, online digital marketing, and kind of like, we're trying to get you leads through LinkedIn or Facebook ads, right? Very much that kind of modern digital world. Again, we're working with, say, attorneys, doctors, high-end consultants, we've even working with cleaning companies, and, very, very different things, people that have shelving solutions. So a lot of that has been looking at what were the opportunities to go online. So actually I can give it, again, practical examples. We also work with a lot of people that help with financial services, whether they are advising, CPAs, bookkeepers, financial coaches. There's a lot of things around money. And one of our clients, Tracy, we've helped her scale her business rapidly. So it's really been on a trajectory like that. But, she was still doing a lot of meetings with clients where she's driving across town, spending several hours with them, getting stuck in traffic, and then going back to her office. And in her mind, because she runs bookkeeping and kind of financial consulting and CFO services, in her mind, most, back then, let's say, most bookkeepers or many bookkeepers would have a service where they would go into somebody else's business, right? You're kind of like the outsourced bookkeeper. So in her mind, that was the traditional model that she had inherited. And with COVID, I'm like, you don't have to go and sit in their office. You've got all these online systems that, you're already using. We just need to dial them in a bit more. And she's saved hours and hours every single week, whereby she's not leaving her office and everything is happening online. And of course, it's about educating clients at that point to be, do they know Zoom? For example, you and I are connected on that right now. I feel like most people have been living under a rock these days if they don't, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't. And then it was educating the clients that we don't need in-person meetings, and that there's so much we can do virtually. So, that's an example in a financial business. With some of our attorneys, it's been a little bit different and more difficult because depending on the state that they were practicing law in, they needed to be going to court, or they needed to have official, notaries and witnesses to documents. And yet here they were in, almost lockdown situations. So again, there, we had to get creative around how much could be done via Zoom and using, modern technology. And then in one case, we even got several attorneys in a local town to collaborate with social distancing, I might add, whereby they were able to act as notaries and witnesses, for colleagues, so that they could, actually get documents signed, just because like the system that they were operating in hasn't kept up with the changes. So they needed to find some kind of workarounds.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's been a lot of different changes the last 8 months or so. Depending on what service they offer, they have a different business model for growing their business. So of course it's very different from whether you're an attorney, a doctor, and so forth. But in terms of milestones before getting to scaling, or milestones while you're scaling, what kind of milestones is sort of a guidance when you work with companies? For example, 100K and then 500K, a million, and so forth. What are the individual milestones before people get to scaling?
Absolutely.
What are the kind of targets people would reach for, and what kind of metrics we use other than the dollar sign itself
Absolutely.
to measure those? Yeah.
So and again, we have some unique things, right, in the Business Growth Academy that kind of, again, we do things slightly differently, to some of the traditional models. So for example, for me, getting to 100K is that you are just proving a concept. It's a proof of concept. For me, it's, typically you're a solopreneur at that point, you one-to-one services. It's a great milestone. I think it's a really great milestone. Unfortunately, not many businesses in the US ever even get beyond 100K in revenue. So I think a lot of them kind of think that is the destination. I see it as a key milestone that says, you've figured out some things. You've figured out that you know how to solve some problems. You've figured out some people that you can work with. You've obviously got a process. You know how to monetize it. You know how to make some sales, and you obviously know how to deliver. So for me, that's a great platform to take it to the next level. But let's see it as a milestone and not a destination.
So 100K is the annual revenue, or when people hit 100K in a given time frame?
No, annual revenue.
Okay.
So that would be an annual revenue. And I'm based here in Arizona. And I mean, some of the stats, certainly I know more of the stats that relate to women-owned businesses as well, but they're a little bit different, a little bit less. But, here in Arizona, only about 12%, something like 12 to 15% of businesses go over 100K in a year.
So 88% don't even hit 100K.
Exactly. And the large majority are under that. So they're, honestly, they're making less than if they had a job, right? So that's a key milestone. And actually there's one of the key milestones that tends to happen with our business owners. We actually work with business owners typically once they're over 100K, scaling up to 1 million. That's kind of our market. But you talk about a milestone, a lot of our business owners will often talk about a salary that they paid themselves that they received previously, in a life before when they were in corporate. And oftentimes that becomes like one of their goals and one of their milestones that they want to, get beyond that, paying themselves from their business. So, those are often personal milestones. The next one is really, is really getting to that $250,000 mark. And that's oftentimes we find that people get to around 125, 140 in annual revenue. And that's when we actually need to come in and help them change the business model, because they're typically working way too hard, too many hours, too many different kind of offers that they have as well with their clients, too many different things, too many custom things, too many price points, right? And it's kind of messy and scrappy, which is a great way to get a business off the ground. But when we talk about scaling, like, there's nothing central that can actually be scaled. It's just, the business owner kind of doing the work. So at that point, that's when we often start to dive into some of those core pieces to get it to that $250,000. Then obviously the next milestone typically is about 500,000, right? The $500,000 mark. And we're certainly looking at that point now. We're definitely looking at, obviously serving more clients. It's now, there's definitely going to be some sort of team. Whether team is employees or outsourced, again, depends on the type of business. But, now we're looking at kind of more team and systems, and also being very mindful of the financial side of the business, because, sometimes, and, it's not unheard of as well, that I'll hear, when I was on my own, I was actually keeping a lot more money. Now I'm trying to grow and scale this thing, and it feels like all the money's going out for other things, and I'm paying everybody else, and I'm managing everybody else, and what about me? So, that's where we have to be very, aware of the numbers to make sure that everything's making sense, and, and the business owner is being well taken care of. And of course, then after that, it's typically, $750,000 and $1 million. Now, here's something that's actually really interesting that we do on that journey. And we do this consistently, right, throughout the journey. And it's kind of a repeatable process. But we find that what happens is when people are looking to grow and scale their business, they're looking at that end goal and the vision, and especially they get to a certain point where perhaps they've been really excited about their business, and now they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had a day off in ages, or I'm not having, daren't travel, because if I travel, everything, who does my business? And when they want to grow and scale, but they don't really realize all the obstacles that are in the way. And we have a process that we call the $1 million question that we take them through. And the $1 million question is, it's a very simple yet confronting question, because oftentimes when I'm working with a business owner and I'll say, well, what happens if you were to quadruple the size of your business? What happens if you were 10 times your business? Like, what would be the first thing to break? And 9 times out of 10, their response is me. Right? So, like, as the business owner, I'm like, we're not ready to grow and scale this. There's other things that we need to do. And the $1 million question is actually asking about all the things that you are tolerating in your business that really you don't want to be doing, that are draining energy, that are not going to help you get to the next level. Like, what are those tolerations that you're carrying around with you? A little bit like the metaphor is, you want to climb a high mountain and you've got a backpack, right, full of all these things and rocks and heavy things. It's like, do you want to get to the top of the mountain with the minimum in the backpack, or do you want to carry everything with you? And then you're just, burnt out. So we go through that process, and it's very confronting, because most business owners have never asked themselves, they've never taken the time to sit down to ask themselves the question honestly about what they're tolerating. And that is when often they'll be like, oh my gosh, like, we're tolerating bad clients. We're tolerating, not charging enough for our services. A lot of them will say, I'm tolerating not even knowing the financials, or, I'm tolerating working too long, right? So we actually start there, and we then help them, right, remove those tolerations, because none of us want to be thinking about growing that business, taking it to the next level, and now all we've got is a whole pile of things that we hate doing, drain our energy, and all we can see is, oh my gosh, I've got to keep doing more of everything I don't like doing.
Yeah, you got a really good point because at each stage, if you say like you 5x your business or 10x, and then all of a sudden you don't have time to manage all these new clients or onboard them and so forth. So the follow-up question I have for this is when building the business from scratch and getting to that 100K milestone and knowing that in the future something is going to break when they're trying to scale it. So knowing that, should they approach it from a standpoint of, okay, eventually I'm going to scale it, so I'm going to have those things dialed in early on, even before you get to 100K? Or is it more like the first 100K is an exploratory process where you're trying a whole bunch of other stuff and you know that you're going to eventually have to cut a lot of these things and just focus on maybe one or two processes and have the system in place, it just kind of going through that process?
I think you really answered the question perfectly. It's, but as far as I'm concerned, that first 100K is the exploratory process. And what I've found as well is that people get very attached, especially if it's the first first business. It's like it's their baby, and they don't want to think that it's going to break or that it's not scalable or whatever, right? And especially if first time around, people can be pretty naive about what it takes to grow a business and the scalability. So that's why I actually prefer working with people that have been in business for a while, because they tend to be a little bit more humbled, right? And when we're frustrated with things, actually it's really good territory for change. We often need to feel a bit of that friction to be ready to look at something and actually change it. And at least at that point, they'll have had the experience getting to that first 100K or beyond, as the case may be, of yes, some frustrations. When I ask the question around things that they're tolerating, they are ready, right, with a list typically, and they're ready to get down to work.
Yeah, so at every stage, when they're trying all these different things, there is bound to be that frustration. And in a way, that could also help them refine, throughout their whole journey, start to cut things or to start to change things. For example, you mentioned a point where people are working with clients that they don't enjoy working with. It's not something you want to be tolerating even before the 100K. But if they're aware of that, perhaps they can fire some of the bad clients and just focus on the good ones.
Absolutely, and again, we've all got, when you get a business off the ground, you kind of want anyone that can breathe, right? Anybody that's willing to speak to you and pay you is often how that happens, and that's how we often even work out who do we prefer working with. And some people can be really afraid of getting rid of clients. You say firing them, they've been with them for a while, perhaps they've been with them from the beginning, but they're, draining. And the whole process around the tolerations as well is really looking at, as business owners, excuse me, my dogs are going to have a bark here. I think it's feeding time for them. But as business owners, we can't, although we wear many hats, especially in small business, the reality is we're not good at 50 different things. Some of us are great on systems, some of us are more visionary, some of us are going to be really good in the financials or in selling. And the idea behind that removing the tolerations is to get the business owner closer and way more aligned with their own unique zone of genius. What are the things that only they can do in the business? And so then everything else can be delegated. Sometimes it's even a case of it's not even necessary, right? Outsourced, whatever that might be. But the whole idea is we're starting to get the business owners in that zone of genius, their sweet spot, which is very energizing for them. And that sweet spot is the place where it also generates more revenue for the business. So again, the businesses that we're dealing with, a lot of our business, our, let's say, CEOs, they move themselves into more of a business development role. They become more visible, right, out in the public eye, whatever that is, online, local events, whatever that looks like now, so that they're the face of the business and actually really starting to grow and drive that growth. And then they're hiring other people to do the work.
Yeah, so essentially they're delegating stuff that is not part of their core business and spending more time on things like sales and business development, which when you get to, I would feel that most businesses would have to put a big focus on business development anyway, unless they can hire someone to do it.
Well, it's interesting. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Logically, absolutely. But you'd be amazed at what happens is people get so stuck in the weeds of their business, right? And then they're the ones dealing with the clients and they're doing the work for the clients, that business development often becomes, right, like the last thing. So they know that they should be doing more of it, but it's not happening. So that's a lot of the things that we train them on, is like really shifting that and being a lot more proactive so that they're, you know, consistently growing their revenues, having a consistent pipeline of new clients to serve. Otherwise, what ends up happening is we're serving our clients, doing the work, and then the next time, you know, we look, is now income and revenue is being affected.
Mm. So would you say that when someone is bogged down with deliveries to their clients, at what point do they would feel that this is not working? They need to either hire someone or just find someone to do delivery, and they spend more time on just the sales?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Oftentimes that just happens through kind of conversation, I think, with me and somebody else. Again, you know, people, we often can't see outside of the world that we're in, right? Especially when we're bogged down with it. But oftentimes, I mean, it can be that things are just so crazy that they realize, like, they're just working all of these hours and there's no freedom at all, and that they know full well something's got to change. So oftentimes, you know, yes, at that point, it's like, who do they need to hire, right? But again, that comes back to, we want to look at the business model first as well. I mean, I've had cases where it was a speech therapy practice, for example, and the owner was, you know, working all of these hours. Everybody, you know, there's kind of quite a lot of stress in the system. And she thought that, you know, marketing was the way to solve that problem. And I just need to work out what the marketing strategies are, and this will solve it. And, that, you know, again, with experience, I just quickly ask a few questions like, marketing is not going to solve this problem. I've got a hunch that fundamentally your business model is flawed, you know, and you're trying to fix something that's broken with a strategy that's completely incorrect, and it's never ever going to work. And so when we did analyze the business further, yes, I was, you know, let's say fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, I was correct. And so we actually had to go kind of, you know, a little bit backwards to the drawing board. Like, let's make sure that this all makes sense. And this was somebody that did have, you know, quite a significant team. It did involve, you know, some of the team members. Through that analysis, we discovered that, you know, a couple of those team members, you know, were really not performing optimally. They'd become very comfortable in, you know, what they were doing. So they were, you know, become a cost to the business as opposed to an asset to the business. And so, yes, we had to change up the team and then, you know, work from there. Now, of course, now we're looking at marketing strategies and growing, but this is now a growing business with a, you know, kind of a new way of developing. They've also gone online to be, you know, modern and keeping up with things, and you know, considerably in a healthier financial position as well. So, you know, sometimes the business owner thinks, oh, this is the problem and this is how I'm going to solve it, and like, can you help me with it? And we've got to take a step back and go, let's make sure we're solving the right problem first.
Mm. And that typically comes from asking the right questions. And you have in your book, you talk about the $1 million question. And is the $1 million question just in this book? Is it just that question you talked about, where what is the something that you know, the things that you tolerate in your business, or is there a whole, you know, stream of different questions that business owners should ask?
There are. I mean, obviously there are more that go with that, but I mean, it does start with really being very honest about, you know, what you're tolerating in the first place. And then I talk about the 3 kind of key mindsets that one needs to adopt or be aware of in order to make some changes, because, you know, change can be really difficult, and especially in business, people can get very resistant. Like, we've worked so hard, and understandably so, like, you've worked so hard to build something, and now all of a sudden, you know, it's like, we're going to change it. You know, people get worried that, you know, we're going to break something and it's all going to fall apart. And we can't always see that, you know, it's going to be so much better. So, the three mindsets, almost like three legs of a stool, is I'll talk about, the first mindset is as a business owner, like the business will only grow by the amount you're willing to grow yourself. So if you keep wanting to do the same thing and you don't want to evolve in your thinking and you develop new skills, then that you'll see that in your revenues. Revenues will plateau and be stagnant. The second mindset is around you've got to hold yourself to higher standards. You've got to demand more for yourself. You've got to demand more for your business. So again, that can look like lots of different things, but it's like it's time to, raise the bar on what you're doing. And then the third mindset, which really tends to be the most difficult for people, is you've got to let go in order to grow. And that's that piece, we're dealing with entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, there's inherent risk involved. It's the very nature of entrepreneurship. And so, a lot of people, again, kind of want to have they want to see that it's all going to be perfect before they make the changes. It's like, no, we've got to agree that we're letting go of certain things or a certain way of thinking about something in order to grow. So that's the start point of the process. But then, we'll look at things like doing an energy audit, like really one of the biggest things I hear is complaints about time, and there's not enough time in the day. Well, there's never going to be more time in the day. We all know that. Doesn't matter where you live in the world, it's the same, 24 hours, right? Every single day. But your energy is something that you can influence. So again, that's why that importance of, what are the things that are energizing for you versus what are the things that are draining? Because again, the reality is to grow and scale a business takes a lot of energy. So there's, many different ways that we kind of look at that and open it up further. And then we actually, in the book, The $1 Million Question, I have, our own business model, which is called, the business acceleration model, that kind of people can then apply that question to the different parts of that business model.
Yeah. So for those listening, definitely check it out. Is it, that you have a digital version of the book that people can just go on your website and
absolutely they can
download,
go
right?
Yep, absolutely. They can go to vanessashaw.com and sign up there and find the book, or businessgrowthacademy.com. And again, free download, and it takes about probably 90 minutes to read the book. And then there's a scorecard and some other resources that even go with it to kind of assist business owners in doing their own assessment of where they're at.
Awesome. Great to have you on the show, Vanessa. I'll leave all the links in the show notes, and for everyone that's tuning in can go and check them out and start to apply those questions and into your own business and ask the difficult questions to confront what's really happening in your business. And if you're stuck, to really go and seek for help and find the right advice and guidance. So really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the show, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have a great day. We're heading off into our evening over here, so different sides of the day.
Yes, definitely. 12, 15 hours apart.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. You can find more episodes every Tuesday. If you haven't done so, please subscribe for more updates as they come. Until next time.